Good evening. Well, thank you. and a very warm welcome to ESMT, European School of Management and Technology. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to today's panel discussion with dignitaries from the, and now I hope I always pronounce the abbreviation the right way, FICCI, so the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. And we are particularly delighted to welcome the delegation here in Berlin after, as I can imagine, a pretty busy day of traveling, a pretty busy day of meetings, and in particular also a pretty busy day ahead of you, about which I will talk in a minute. Maybe just a few remarks on us, on ESMT. ESMT is a relatively young school. It was founded only in 2002. It's as I would say with good reason, the most international business school in Germany. All our programs here are taught in English, and what I would like to stress in particular is that we have lots of Indian students here, lots of Indian alumni. We have members of our faculty, professors from India. So I would say that from our heritage, from our current composition of faculty and students, we are a particularly good place to have this discussion, and in this sense we are also particularly delighted to welcome you here tonight. Now, as I said, there will be a pretty busy day ahead, which is the Indo-German Investment Summit that will take place tomorrow. And it's clear that under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, there are lots of measures, just to mention a few, Make in India, Digital India campaigns that are designed to make India a choice or a destination of choice for foreign direct investment. We are very delighted to hear various views on this topic, on this very important topic. It's a topic that also we think of being very important, given that ESMT views itself as a platform to foster the exchange, the international exchange, economically, politically, and of course academically. And in particular, we are very delighted to hear the keynote speech by Mr. Sidharth Birla, the president of the FICCI and the chairman of IXPRO India. So thank you very much for actually providing us with your insights and expertise. After this, there will be a panel discussion in which Mr. Birla will also join. And apart from Mr. Birla, there will be Mr. Raja Vardhan Kanoria, past president of the FICCI and the chairman and managing director of Kanoria Chemicals and Industries. Mr. Bernd Mützelburg, Ambassador and Managing Director of Ambassador Associates International Networking GmbH. Mr. Harshpati Singhania, past President of FICCI and Vice Chairman and Managing Director of JK Paper Limited. The good part is as well that this panel discussion, we also will have a contribution from our side, and the moderator of the panel discussion is my dear colleague, Professor C.B. Bhattacharya, the Dean of International Relations at ESMT and the shareholder of the EON share in Corporate Social Responsibility. Now, as always at ESMT, we would like to keep it interactive. This means after the panel discussion, there will also be the opportunity for questions and answers to actually make it as enriching and enlightening discussion as possible. So in that sense, as I said, we are very delighted to host the discussion here at ESMT. We are very happy that you are here. And I would in particular once more stress that it's a great honor for us, for you to be here in a very packed couple of days that you spent here in Germany. Finally, last but not least, I would like to thank very much those who have been very helpful in bringing this event together and helping us. This means in particular the organization team at FICCI led by Mr. Gaurav Vats and the Embassy of India, various colleagues there who have worked with us very closely, who have followed with us, who've discussed with us various aspects over the last couple of months. So in that sense, I hope that the current discussion, the current panel discussion, our insights today will not just be a matter of today, but rather will be following us over the next couple of months and will be a starting point for a very fruitful exchange that we look very much forward to. In this sense, please join me in very, very warmly welcoming Mr. Birla for his keynote speech.
Good evening. I'm actually very nervous to be making this speech, so please feel free and relax. I have some written points, but I'll try to be extempo and speak from my written points to try and give you a sense of what we are talking today. Thank you, Professor Okal, President ESMT, Professor Bhattacharya, Dean International Relations and Eon Chair in Corporate Responsibility, professors, ESMT faculty members, students, friends, and all the seniors here, my colleagues. I think before I begin whatever I want to say formally, it's for people who understand India. I used this example some time ago. Just imagine if 3 blindfolded people who've never seen an elephant in their life are taken to an elephant and asked to feel the elephant and try and describe what is it that they are feeling. So somebody holds the trunk and he says this is something snaky, and somebody holds the tail and he says this is a very thin animal. Somebody touches the leg and he says this is like a tree trunk. So it's 3 people touching exactly the same thing, not knowing what they're touching, and when they open the blindfold, they see it's actually one complete elephant, and that is exactly what India is. India is different in the south of Delhi. India is different in the north of Delhi, which is just the capital. India is absolutely different 30 kilometers outside Delhi. At the same time, what binds India and what this election has shown, since we are particularly focused on where do we think we are going after this election. Just to give you an idea, 850 million people voted in this election. Now, 850 million is a huge number even by our standards. Out of that, uniformly, across states, in villages, in cities, in towns, across states, across religious lines, across lines of language, different states speaking different people, by and large, the result was the same, by and large. And this 850 million people included about 120 million youngsters who voted for the first time in their life. So I'm setting the context as to where India is going. And what is this elephant, which is bound together by all these differences, is that very clearly the youth and the average person in India voted for employment, economic growth, and the opportunity to have a job. And that really became the plank of the economic agenda of this government. And happily, nobody changed the economic agenda. This is the agenda that the government spoke about from day one, in their election speeches. So we have to look at this in the context that this elephant is moving, whether it is the 50 kilometers outside Delhi or 200 kilometers inside Uttar Pradesh, or it is south of India, the aspirations of the entire society are one, that is to have a job, economic growth, and their life tomorrow should be better than today. So this is the context under which the economic policy of India is being formulated. Now what I want to say is that, of course, why I'm delighted to be here at the ESMT this evening, and many of you will soon step into the real business world and evaluate regional opportunities for growth of the organizations that you may work for. On rational consideration of many factors, you will likely find that the large growing markets in Asia are a natural choice for progressive business plans. And within that, India cannot fail to occupy a key position. Coming to what is happening in India today, I'll start with a simple line: leadership is a very powerful motivator. So people see dynamic leadership in Prime Minister Modi, who communicates his vision and ideas eloquently and leads from the front. India's leadership, therefore, regenerated attention worldwide. Rebuilding confidence and trust has been vital in bringing India back on the radar for domestic and global investors alike. This excitement is reflected via renewed confidence and trust of the common man, domestic businesses, and foreign investors. Rating agencies have upgraded their outlook for India. FICCI is an organization of long standing which represents the voice and views of Indian industry and trade. It is a formidable interface with all governments on policy issues. We share the faith of the people and also appreciate that global faith will translate into deliverables by taking into account how Indian business charts its way forward in taking investment positions. This is what the world is really waiting to see. While India has an active position in global trade, it has not made a mark equal to its capabilities in the global markets. This has partly been the result of being largely a domestic-led economy, where sheer numbers can be just mind-boggling. As just one example, the size of our middle class, which is spoken about quite often, is equal to the numbers of many entire countries in Europe and elsewhere. So, for example, when I spoke of 850 million people voting, it's almost a mind-boggling figure. If you add to this the growth factors, even in a bad year, our economy grew at about 5.7%. We hope to end close to 6%. Hopefully next year will be 8%. If we multiply that growth, increased transition from low incomes to higher incomes, that is more people coming out of the poverty line, not really making it to the middle class per se, but certainly what can be called a lower middle class. So the purchasing power sort of multiplies into consumption of goods once you have crossed the basic level of needs. All this will tell you why the market is attractive. In addition, what is going to happen is we hopefully will have the introduction of a goods and services tax, which is similar to value-added tax. Hopefully it should happen in calendar 2015. Apart from the financial impact, what this does is creates a unified market by simplifying both product taxation and movement across state borders. So imagine India as one complete common market, and the potential multiplies. For us, 8% plus growth is essential to add more than 1 million non-farm jobs each month for the next 10 years. We are a young country. 65% of the population is below the age of 35. In about 10 years, 56% of the population will still be under the age of 35. We will be the youngest country in the world for a long time. It is important that our demographic dividend is seen not just as a potential market, but as a resource of skill and talent for a wide variety of manufacturing and services, and also for agriculture, which is the largest self-employer today. Significant steps are being taken on initiating labor reforms to ensure greater accountability of both management and workforce. In the end, we are working towards enabling laws which make it easier for business to employ people with matching comfort on the other side also. Central to all policy making is the core need for higher investments and growth. A series of steps have been taken and are being further planned to sharply revive manufacturing and build world-class infrastructure. These measures are in early days, and we hope to see results starting in 18 months or so, maybe even earlier. Rather than focus only on high-level policy, our government has also started work from the ground up to enhance ease of doing business. We see multiple steps to simplify procedures, laws, rules, with increased technological intervention to ensure transparency, speed, and effective governance. Digital India is the name given to a new flagship program under which all government services must be delivered electronically by 2018. The Prime Minister started many other programs, again in mission mode, whether it is the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, which is the Clean India movement, which is linked directly to sanitation and cleanliness, the Jan Dhan Yojana, which is a plan for financial inclusion, or the Make in India goal. Such mission mode initiatives gives clarity to priorities and the plans of the government and helps to build trust and confidence. The Make in India mission was first mentioned by Prime Minister Modi in his Independence Day, the 15th August speech, and then formally launched in September at a gathering of business leaders from India and abroad. It set out a vision of making India a global manufacturing hub and export powerhouse. 25 focus sectors have been identified, for which steps have been initiated to create a positive ecosystem and attract investments. I would like to say that India has historically been fair to business and has delivered as a profitable destination. Some businesses from Germany have been in India for decades and have nothing but good to say about their experience. Yes, there has been negativity and uncertainty that affected our entire country's growth in the last few years. But with the new government, we are seeing change, with emphasis on growth, being pro-investment, and a clear willingness to welcome and not just invite capital. Over time, India has liberalized policies for foreign investment. Besides liberalization for defense manufacturing and a likely positive move on insurance in the next session of Parliament, foreign investments have been opened up for high-speed trains, suburban and dedicated freight corridors, and other infrastructure. This offers immense opportunities as India has the second largest railway network in the world, which also needs upgrading. There is emphasis on infrastructure, as I mentioned. To give an idea of the scale, in the coming years, we estimate that about $1 trillion needs to be spent on infrastructure. There is a plan to build 100 new smart cities. Smart cities, again, to provide all the facilities, to have them interconnected, to have them fully integrated into a smart network. At the same time, what this does is stops migration from the smaller towns into the large towns, and the large towns are becoming unmanageable because at least the 4 main towns have populations exceeding 10 million in the city itself, and in the larger area, maybe with a population exceeding 15 million. So it's really a challenge to stop them from growing. Other than this, energy and energy security are very important subjects for India. We need to scale up energy resources and renewable sources like solar and wind for power. We anticipate investment of almost $100 billion in the renewable energy space over the next 4 years, and add to that another $50 to $60 billion in transmission and distribution infrastructure. Clean technologies, waste, and environment management are all equally topical, particularly if you look at the building of new cities and the management of existing cities. In closing, I'd like to say that our Prime Minister regularly points out that the 21st century will be Asia's century. Asia is home to the largest part of the world's population, and India has the undoubted potential to make it to the League of Top Nations. Governance, execution, and delivery are key to our turnaround and growth. With clear efforts of the government to drive investments, growth, and jobs, India offers opportunities for investors and business that one could not have dreamed of earlier. I'm sure India will play a positive role in all your careers. Thank you.
Very good. So thank you all for being here. So I'm C.B. Bhattacharya, and I hope I had the pleasure of saying hello to you personally, most of you. And I'm joined by this distinguished group of panelists here who have already been introduced. You already heard from Mr. Birla, and there's Mr. Kanoria to my extreme right, Mr. Mutzelberg, and Mr. Singhania to my left. And at least 60% of the panelists, which is 3 out of 5 in this case, have a working knowledge of Bengali, my mother tongue. So yes. if everything else fails, I mean, we might slip into that.
4 out of 5.
And 4 out, oh, you as well. Ah.
Yes.
He also.
I thought you forgot you.
Oh, you thought I forgot myself, yeah.
So
it is that time of day.
যদি আপনি চান এখানে বাঙালিতে ডিসকাশন হতে পারে।
And all 3 of our FICCI delegation are MBAs from elite institutions.
2 from IMD.
Two from IMD.
From USA.
And Mr. Singhania from the USA. And we'll get to that. We'll get to talking about MBA education and what our graduates can perhaps do in India. But let me start with you, Mr. Birla. You talked about economic growth, and you mentioned 8% as a number. What are some of the things that need to happen for this growth to be realized? Because whenever we talk of India, which is the elephant that you so well described, there are significant impediments as well to growth. So what are some of the things that must happen in the near term for that 8% growth to be realized?
Okay. The largest part of our population works in agriculture. And I think agricultural productivity and agricultural growth will play a very important part as part of this 8%. Okay. 2 issues. One is certainly productivity can improve. Certainly we can bring in new methods into production using better seeds, water management, soil health. These are tried and true. These experiments have been tried in certain states, but if at a national level it's done, we will have a greater output. The second issue is that we produce a lot of agricultural produce, but because of the lack of cold chain facilities and distribution facilities, a lot of it is going to waste. So it never really shows up as output. So these are very quick fixes, low-hanging fruit, which we can catch. So on the agricultural side, I think improvement in distribution, improvement in productivity and technological management will help. This is the first part. On the second side, manufacturing, as I said, has a great importance. Today, most manufacturing industry is running at capacities of about 80%. Why did I say that it'll take 18 months for the manufacturing capacity or the growth or the investments to show up? Because if industries are running at about 80%, nobody's really going to put money in new capacities until they can see the existing capacity getting full up. At this rate of growth, by next year, we should be hitting high 80s or early 90s, depending on the industry. That is the time when people reach for the checkbooks and invest. Okay? But the important thing is that we have the capacity to go from 80 to 100 in terms of capacity. And with a better market, this is going to add. Number three, infrastructure construction will drive economic growth. Number four, natural resources development, which has been the subject of much anguish and ups and downs in India because of policy flip-flops and, let me use the word, non-clarity of policy. So I think there what has happened is when our growth fell, a lot of growth fell in the natural resources area, which is either coal mining or iron ore mining and things like that. So I think if you put all of this together, you can see a very quick, almost sort of a no-brainer increase from 6% to 7% plus on its own. Okay, so I think very, very clearly we can see the horizon on 8 to 9% in a couple of years.
Very good, very good. Thank you for that. Turning to you, Mr. Singhania, you have so much expertise in the manufacturing industry that Mr. Birla pointed to as one of the keys to growth. What specifically are the key challenges that the manufacturing industry faces, and what are the competitive advantages, if any, that India has in this sphere?
All right, now, so let me pick up from what Mr. Birla said right now and also in his remarks. See, one of the big challenges remains the big issue of infrastructure, and we keep talking about that. Because infrastructure is essential in rendering Indian business competitive. And if we have our infrastructure, which is our highways, ports, railways, power plants, energy, we are going to be addressing a major issue in terms of competitiveness and enablers of business, particularly manufacturing. Now, it's estimated that India needs about $1 trillion of investment in 5 years' time on infrastructure. So that infrastructure, to my mind, is one of the biggest issues. So that's the hardware. The other side is, let's come to the software, which is human capital and skills. I think one of the issues which we have faced in the past is that, and it's interesting we talk about it in a management institution because of this sort of penchant in India with degrees. And the point is to get, in the old days, and probably the time that you were there, the mental thing was that if you got a bachelor's degree, you would get a job. Without that, you would not get a job. And that was the mental makeup there. So today what is happening is we are turning out a very large numbers and hundreds of thousands of people, of engineers and managers and college students. But the fit with the skill sets that are required to operate equipment or even at the lower level. So why do projects get delayed in India? Projects are getting delayed today not because of equipment and this, that, the other, but because we have a shortage of masons, bar benders, electricians, and so on. So I think that's the example I'm giving you. So there are two sides. One is the infrastructure and everything else, and there's a whole lot of other stuff. But the second is going to be the human capital. And I think the new government is trying to address both of these issues very, very seriously. You asked what is the competitive advantage that we have, and it is very sector specific. But I think we have several things. First of all, we start with an extremely large market in India. It's a market that any country or any company could dream of. The second is our human resources themselves. Imagine if all these people, or a large number of these people, could be trained and aligned, what kind of output that we could have. And you've seen that in the IT industry, for example, where human capital from India really rose, and today Indian human capital is powering the world, including German companies, SAP, et cetera, et cetera. So there are many things, and we could go on and on, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of these issues in terms of that.
So yeah, please.
Mr. Singhania forgot to mention that particularly in the Indian psyche, it is very important to either have a degree or a government job before you got a good wife.
Certainly. Are you telling me this is not the case anymore?
I reserve judgment, but that's the psyche.
No, there are good wives otherwise as well.
No, I just wanted to follow up and say, so since we are in this Indo-German context, so what role do you think Indo-German cooperation can play to bolster this competitive advantage?
Oh, a lot. And if I can just say, take a couple of examples, because there are so many areas. I think let's start with the human capital part of it. One of the things that, that Germany has made its mark on, or has been specialized on, is this entire apprenticeship and this entire training system, the dual training system, if you will, which produces the right kind of human capital. I think in our day-to-day itself, all the meetings that we have been to, including with whether it's the Minister of Finance and everybody else, we have talked about saying that this is where Germany can help us. Then there are a whole there are a whole host of areas, starting from infrastructure in terms of railways. Our trains already run with German coaches, with German-built coaches. There's a whole new chapter that will come in. The whole area of renewable energy, the whole area of urban infrastructure or renewing urban infrastructure. So there are many, many, many areas, and not to forget the issue of high technology. Now, as you would have read in the press, that the government of India, particularly Prime Minister Modi, has been very vocal about opening up the defense sector to private industry and bringing in public-private partnerships between Indian companies and foreign companies, joint ventures and public-private partnership between government and Indian and private industry in the defense area. Now, Germany has a huge amount of high technology units, many of which could come from Mittelstand. So I think there are immense number of cooperation, and pretty much where you could put your finger on, there can be work together.
Very good. Turning to you, Mr. Kanoria, I recently read the World Bank report that said that the ease of doing business in India ranked 142 out of some 190 countries that was ranked. What can you point to that gives us optimism under this new regime that India has, that this situation is going to change in the foreseeable future?
So let me tell you that as businessmen in India, and as successful businessmen in India, we have done business and made money without bothering about whether there is ease of business index of World Bank or no ease of business on World Bank. I think that is the real crux of it. Indian businesses need to come back to the table to start investing. And 50% of the battle has already been won with the new government being elected on the development platform. We see that decision making in the country will happen. I mean, when I say decision making will happen, I am not saying there will be good decisions or bad decisions. There will be decisions, which has not been so in the last 5 years of the previous government. So, as businessmen, what we are looking at is quick decisions, continuity of decisions, durability of decisions, and I think the rest of these issues need to be answered by German companies coming into India with good Indian partners who know how to get over the ease of doing business. Because ultimately the ease of doing business is also discussed on several theoretical issues of whether how many forms have to be filled and how many clearances have to be obtained. But it's not that those clearances are not obtained, and it's not that those forms are not filled. So my view is that India offers one of the finest opportunities in terms of the size of market, in terms of its entrepreneurial potential, in its ability to adapt to situations and to work in difficult environments. And there is, at the end of the day, there is the right to property, the right to speak out, the freedom of doing what you wish to do, and there will be problems. I don't think there is any country which has no problem. And if I can, sorry, Ambassador, you said it to me before this meeting, but India, you will always have problems or probably very little answers. So I think what we need to understand is that there is a huge opportunity in India, and despite what may be perceived as difficulties, we are open for business, and we will be open for business. And the World Bank Index, I mean, there are some difficult factors. For example, our taxation systems. Now, I think there will be reform. I think basically it's a mindset problem. It's a revenue-minded tax administration, which is basically in the collection mode. And it needs to move into a mode where it is free for the fair for both the taxpayer and the tax collector. And I think very strong messages are being sent by this government and by the finance minister that tax administration should improve. And new committees have been formed under Mr. Vijay Kelkar, who was a very, he has been one of the architects of reform in the financial systems earlier. So I personally think that this ease of doing business index may sound very, very, very difficult, and it sometimes obfuscates and creates more problems than solutions. But Indian businesses do business, they make money, and those companies which are there in India, even as foreign companies, make money. So
German
this is
companies included.
Yes.
Mr. Birla, yes.
I'd just very quickly like to respond, and particularly since we are talking to a community of largely students. The ease of doing business, for the sake of making a report, this is my personal views, and I'll articulate some of the issues. Mr. Kanori has already mentioned some of them. Every country has its own priorities, and every country has the right to choose its own priorities and how it will go about them. I'm not trying to defend India's case. But then I'm challenging the very logic of putting 190 countries together. And I think as students, it is our job to challenge theories. Whether we can put 190 countries together and put a number on every one of them, that this is important, and we haven't really thought it through. Let me say, because our past chief economic advisor, Kaushik Basu, he in fact left screaming against the report, and now he's gone and authored it, and so he says, I never realized I'll be sitting as an author. But let me ask a simple question. India scores 135 on the ease of doing business, okay? We scored number 7 on something called minority protection, yes. Okay? Now tell me which person in this room wants to put money, run a company, and would do it based on the decision that a minority interest is India's number 7 on minority. What relevance does it have to a man making a business decision and investing? Yes, it could be good for a stock market regulation, or if we were trying to rank stock market regulators. From an ease of doing business point of view, a minority protection has very, very little relevance unless you're comparing a group of 7 countries and looking at their stock market regulation. So what I'm saying is that whether it is relevant. If one was to say that minority protection is 7, let me tell you in reverse that under the present Companies Act, which was made in a difficult time, the ease of doing business, we would probably be number 160 on majority protection. Now, if I said a majority protection, we are number 160, would you go to that country? No, you wouldn't. So number 7 wouldn't make you go, but 160 would make you flee. So this is what I'm saying, I'm questioning the relevance. Number 2, it says India is, so these are the 2 areas where India ranks very high. Number 7. Now, so I'm not trying to fault India. All I'm saying is that the index
question the criteria, yeah?
Question the criteria and the fact that can you start endlessly. there's no two ways that ease of doing business in India must improve. But whether it should improve according to those 33 parameters which are written in one report is the real question.
Sure.
One example is the cost of living index, which is developed on the basis of what a McDonald's hamburger costs in each country. Now, I personally think that the criteria which is laid down in itself is wrong. So, I believe that the ease of doing business also one needs to understand what is the criteria involved.
Right. The reality is, though, that most folks in the outside world would probably not go into the details of the criteria, but would simply look at the rank, and therefore, however it is, we need to collectively work on improving that rank.
Absolutely.
Moving on to you, Mr. Ambassador, how has the perception of India changed from the German point of view, and vice versa? So how has the perception of Germany changed from the Indian point of view, to the best of your knowledge, let's say over the last decade?
Before I come to this, I cannot really resist the temptation to tell our Indian guests one or two sentences about why it is so symbolic that we meet tonight here. This is the former Staatsratsgebäude. Actually, this was, so to say, the office from which the GDR was being ruled. And I think it is very symbolic that we meet here at a time where Nehruvian socialism, the remnants of Nehruvian socialism, are finally being overcome, that we meet here also in this place. This place also has a very special importance for me, since when the federal German government moved to Berlin, this was the first federal chancellery, and the room in which we meet was actually the office of Chancellor Schröder, Gerhard Schröder, to whom I reported. My office was just a couple of steps ahead. So since you are taking a new beginning, and that brings me to our subject, I think it is really important that you know. You see, I do indeed have the feeling that Germany is looking at India anew. Especially after these elections, which of course were also being watched with a lot of interest in Germany, not only because of the 850 million participants, but also because we knew, that change was in the air, something had to happen in India. I'm a little bit afraid, though, that the way in which Germans tend to look, maybe also the rest of the world tends to look at India, is to a certain extent mistaken. When I was so lucky to be ambassador in India, there was a lot of euphoria about India. Growth rates of 9%, and, we were already counting when India would finally be the third largest economy of the world, and what have you. And from euphoria, India and the rest of the world went into depression about India. And now we see euphoria again. My thesis would be, a country, with a 5,000-year-old history should not be looked in terms of cycles, which, will repeat each other, whether we want it or not. I think with respect to India, you must take a long-term view. But with respect to that long-term view, I tend to fully agree with what Mr. Kanoria said, Indian businessmen and the German businessmen who had indeed the guts to stay there for the long haul have been making business and have been making good business. Of course, sometimes you've got to be innovative. I know, of course, why Mr. Kanoria did not bother and Mr. Birla did not bother about the ease of doing business in India, because, if the Indian businessmen have, so to say, a head start in front of all the other businessmen of the world, then it's because they have learned how to cope with difficulties. And sometimes you have been able also, to make these difficulties into chances and into opportunities. I know a number of cases in that respect. Nevertheless, I would say, that when a German businessman is looking at India, he would not be very unhappy if, for example, right now, the times which are needed in order to register a company are being reduced from 27 days to 1 day. If suddenly, the opportunity to acquire land is being facilitated enormously. if in a number of fields, it is easier to invest and to repatriate foreign direct investment. And I could go on and on and on. I think what Germany is expecting, though, from India, and this, by the way, is a debate which we also have here in Europe, we expect and we hope for structural reforms. Not just the reforms which you mentioned right now. We would, for example, hope that apart from infrastructure, which is, of course, an obstacle, and it will take a long time until this obstacle will be overcome, if, for example, the labor market would be reformed. I think that is one of the biggest obstacles which also German investors face in India, and I'm sure that you would agree with that. And I see already that this new government is also making a start in doing that. So I think these are the important steps which are being taken and which we are looking forward to. If, for example, suddenly a system which was built also on subsidies is being further liberalized, if the process of privatization is going on, I think these are the issues which we are looking at right now. And I can only say, I don't think that the world, at least not the German world, would expect you to immediately perform miracles. We know that the grand designs, especially in huge countries like India, which is a continent, 29 federal states, plus a couple of, Delhis, which are independent entities. These are super tankers, which where you will not be able to sort of change course, like in a speedboat. What is important, though, is that these gradual steps are being followed up on, and in that way, confidence is being rebuilt in India. I see that happening right now, and I'm really very, very happy about that.
On that happy note, and as the saying goes, time flies when you have fun, and this was certainly a lot of fun. So I would like to thank all the panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedule and coming here, and thank you to the audience for coming here as well. So